Hey guys, welcome to the channel, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to install Azuracast on a fresh, clean test server I made, and I had a lot of questions on this, so I thought we would do a quick video on one. As I will warn you ahead of time, this might be a little bit boring if you've never done this before. Bear with me. There's going to be some, I'll tell you up front, there's going to be some slow spots because we're going to just watch the server click through and do its thing. But yeah, if you've never done this before, I want to show you guys what to expect as it goes through the install process. I am using a basic VPS server just for test purposes. So I'm going to go through this step by step so you guys can see what to expect and the process all involved. So real quick, I'll go through this step by step with you guys and go through the whole install process. Pretty straightforward. This is a real basic VPS, single CPU, not a big deal. If you're planning on using Azuracast for many stations for broadcast purposes, I'll get into that a little bit later. If you're just doing this for your own personal use for 1, 2, 3, 4 stations, something like this is perfect. If you're using it for many stations for resale, I'll get into that when we get into some slow spots during the install. I'll explain what some of my mainline servers, some of those specs are much heavier than something like this. So without getting too deep into the spec stuff, that's not what this video is about. But if you go to open up a browser and head on over to Azuracast.com, and you'll see I have a terminal open and a browser open. And Azuracast.com is where you'll find your install instructions. Very straightforward. They got a lot of information there. And if you just go ahead and click over to the install link, if you would. Typically, most cases, they recommend the Docker installation, which is suitable for almost all installations. And if you follow the instructions on the install link, scroll down to Docker, and you'll see there's 2 sections with a couple of lines of code that you can copy directly from the website and paste right into your terminal window. First couple lines are simply to make a directory, and we'll get to that point. There you go. Just simply copy that. Go over to your terminal and paste it. That makes your Azuracast directory, and now you're going to basically change over to your Azuracast directory. We're actually going to get the files you need to install Docker on your Linux server or your VPS. And the first step here is to actually install Docker. And all Docker is you're installing basically a container to put all your Azuracast files in, is the simplest way to describe it. Most systems don't come with Docker pre-installed, so you're going to answer yes to this and let the system download it and install it. It takes a moment or two. As I mentioned earlier, when we were looking at the specs on the server, this is a test server that I spun up just specifically for this video. Typically, your auto DJ functions, your liquid soap, and these types of things, they draw quite a bit of CPU resources. So if you're going to be running 20 or 30 or 40 stations and you're doing the resale program where you're selling or running 30 to 40 stations, you'll see that a single core CPU is not anywhere near enough horsepower to run those kind of stations, and your server is going to just screech to a halt. I was thinking maybe I may do a future video on that and run some performance tests on a couple of different servers to show you guys the different performance hits depending on how many stations you got running and how many different CPU cores and how much RAM, so you guys can get a good idea of how big of a server do you actually need depending on how many stations you've got running, because I've got several different line servers running. So for test purposes, a single CPU and some RAM will work. At this point, you just answer some simple yes or no questions that are pretty self-explanatory. As I mentioned earlier, the system does not have Docker installed preset with the basic Linux install, so you want to say yes and let that install run as so you actually install Docker. And once you do that, then you'll continue on with the actual Azuracast install. At this point, it's asking you what language you want to install all the files in. The default is English. If English is not your primary language, pick a different language. Otherwise, hit enter and continue. If you have a domain and you want to use Let's Encrypt for SSL, SSH, you can enter that at this point. Otherwise, hit no and continue. Which we're going to just use IP address only at this point because this is just a test run. So we just blew past it and used the default settings. At this point, what it's doing is it's pulling all the Azuracast files now that we hit we answer the default questions, yes, no. And now it's pulling all the install files it needs. And I think too, the bigger, faster the server you install on, the quicker this goes. This is a real basic test system. So I'm looking at the runtime on the video, runs about 10 minutes long. So your start to finish on this will generally run, you can probably get an Azuracast install going from dead start to being on the air with a station in about 10 to 15 minutes is all. It's not that hard, pretty simple to do. You can see now all the files are pulled and now they're extracting and installing. Believe it or not, you're done. So as I said, it was about 10 minutes, it looks like. So you got yourself all your full install run in less than 10 minutes. Not bad. And a couple of lines of copy and paste and a couple of yes or no questions answered and in your terminal, and you're good to go. At this point, what you want to do is, if you're running either your URL or your IP address, you want to copy that IP address or go to your URL and go to that address with your web page, because you do need to complete your setup at this point. First time setup, plug in your email address. This is your admin, your super admin email address and password that you want to plug into Azuracast. This will not necessarily be the station username and password. This is the admin username and password to get into your Azuracast install. When you log in for the first time, it'll ask you to create a radio station. But I'll just plug in test station for now. And you know what? We don't need this terminal window anymore. Let me open up this browser up so you can see the whole thing here. Hold on. There we go. Now we'll have a video coming up here shortly with all the functions of the different tabs on the advanced functions. Most of them are self-explanatory, and I recommend on your first run and initial setup, just go ahead and use the defaults. That'll get you on the air and get you going. And of course, most of the documentation on this stuff is available on Azuracast.com. They do a great job of documentation. It's not rocket science. The purpose, again, of this video is to walk you through on what to expect before you crack open anything and before you start doing this stuff for the first time on a live server, so you know what to expect before you start doing it for yourself. So at this point, go ahead and save your changes. All of these things at this point can be you can change them and save them and adjust it as you go. But at this point, all you're doing is, this is initial setup. Go ahead and save your changes. It should bring you back to your main dashboard. And this is what you'll see when you first log in next time. This is your main admin panel. All your stations are listed here. You would select the station that you want to manage at this point. After you log in, you see that manage button right there. You select the station you want to manage, you click manage, and that'll take you to that station's information panel. And again, you can look down below. I've got some other videos on different types of settings and setups for Azuracast. Okay, and I will be making a benchmark video coming up on how big of a server or VPS you need for the application that you have, as well as advanced functions, as well as some of the new functions and features that they put in the latest versions of Azuracast. So we've got that coming up. So if you think that this video has helped you, I know it's a little bit boring and a little bit long, but I wanted you guys to see what to expect. So if you think this was of service or of help to you or somebody you know, pass it on, subscribe, like it. I do appreciate it. It does help me out, and I do appreciate you guys taking the time to make it this far. And I very much appreciate you guys taking the time to go through this with me. And do look for future videos. As I said, subscribe to the channel if you would. And I will catch you next time. And if you have any comments on the video, please post them below. And I will do my best to answer questions as best I can. And if there's any suggestions on future videos as well, I would appreciate that input as well. Put that in the comments below. And I will catch you next time. Again, this is William from APL. I appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys here next time on the channel. Take care, guys. See ya.